All right, good. Well, welcome. Oh, great timing. We're just about to get started. Grab a seat wherever you like. The ones up front are good. More. Ah, there's a crowd coming. Here we go. All right, well, as the crowd is coming in, Gerard, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Well, welcome, everybody, and I'm excited for you to be here. I know the title is what gripped you. Welcome to the bar. I'm going to start right out of the gate with some introductions of my guests here in this session for you. And what I'd like to do is have them all introduce themselves and their roles. And then what we'll do is we're going to go into a little bit of a discussion about this journey we've been on here in Tennessee. And hopefully for everybody some real insights into how that has given some great results to the tourism department, but also some lessons learned. One of the things that we're particularly interested in is sort of the dynamic between, particularly for Brian, who'll introduce himself in a second, the dynamic that existed between all the different constituents and customers that he has to serve, both internal and external. And hopefully that will come across a little bit in what we share with you today. And then we do have some time at the end for some questions. So hopefully we will inspire you to give us some tough ones. All right, so with that being said, maybe Brian, we could start with you, introduction and role and what you do at the department.
Hey everybody, thanks for being here. My name's Brian Wagner. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Marketing for the Tennessee Department of Tourist Development. Our domestic campaign targets about 12 markets in the United States, and then we have several markets overseas that we target. I'm responsible for the PR, marketing, and industry sales efforts for tourism to market our brand, the Soundtrack of America, made in Tennessee.
I'm Todd Greathouse, a Director of Technology for VML's Drupal practice. I've been there about 8 years. I had the good fortune of being the tech lead for the Tea and Vacation redesign project.
And I'm Chris Wallen, Managing Director of Experience Design and Content Systems for VML, and was actually on the design team. And so the role that I played in the project was helping us with problem definition, really digging into, okay, what do we need to solve for whenever we create this thing? And then working with the user experience team to make sure that we built something that tied everything together, both front end to back end to the actual inspirational experience.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, everybody. So, Brian, let's start with you as sort of the real customer here. I'd love if you could share with everybody at a very high level, what were some of the objectives that were set out for this project as you thought about what success would look like?
Certainly. So I joined the department about 2.5 years ago. Agency VML had already been in place for about 1.5 years. And we'll get into how they were selected to be the agency of record for the state tourism department. But once I came on board and started really digging around into what the programs were for the department, the marketing campaigns, and then the website. And what I found was we were doing a whole lot of really cutting-edge digital marketing with high-quality creative campaigns, and we were sending everyone to a website, and it was like, this website is massive. Even if I know what I'm looking for, it's hard to find it. It's like drop down after drop down after drop down after drop down. I mean, finally one day I actually got a call from our parks department. In Tennessee, we have like 56 state parks. It's obviously a big tourism asset that we have. And there was an issue with one of their pages, and their marketing director called me up and said, hey, it's such and such park. And I was like, okay, well, let me go to the website. I'll go to that page and see what the issue is and try to fix it. So I knew exactly what I was looking for. And I started going through the website, and I couldn't find the damn page. I was like, where is it? So I was like, this website is just too big. It's not a good user experience, and we need to redo it. So just to put that in context, Todd was really happy, but everyone's looking around at me because they had just replatformed, or they were nearly done replatforming this site that was built on a custom CMS system with the previous ad agency into Drupal. And normally that's not exactly how you want to go about doing a web design, right? Like I want to basically blow up the site and totally redo it, and they've just finished taking this beast and all the pages on it and putting it into the Drupal platform. So, you know, it is what it is. We did it anyway and found the money, and we'll get into how all that happened too.
I'm going to move this to the next slide, although we're not going to talk about that just yet because it looks like there's a video playing in that slide, which has got some voice. So
video on your slides and websites is really important.
So one of the things we talked about leading up to this, Brian, and maybe you can help us, you inherited that, and I don't know if you had to deal with this, or maybe you can speak to with your team and your colleagues how this was addressed. But I think one of the challenges often is just getting everybody internally to agree, or at least to agree to allow you to move forward. And that question of alignment becomes difficult. And I think probably everybody who's tried to do that in an organization may have had struggles. So how was that accomplished within an organization like yours? How did everybody get to say, okay, we agree, let's go do that?
That's a good question. So first of all, I had to have buy-in from my boss, right? We all have a boss. My direct supervisor is Commissioner Kevin Triplett, so he's the commissioner, he's a cabinet member for the governor, and he had only started at the department, I don't know, not even a year before I came on board. You know, so he came in and then hired me, and it's been a bit of a reorganization for the department. We also have to deal with a tourism committee, kind of like a task force, if you will. You know, you hear that in government. Well, our governor, Bill Haslam, after talking to people in the tourism industry, and mind you, tourism is the second biggest industry in the state of Tennessee behind agriculture. The economic impact for tourism in our state last year was $19.3 billion, collecting revenues of $1.7 billion for our state. We are a state with no income tax. So tourism is really important, right? So our governor, I guess after he'd been in a couple of years, he's at the end of his 8-year term now, he put together the Tennessee Tourism Committee. And this is about 40 some odd members from across the state, from our bigger CVBs and bigger attractions in Tennessee. We actually have 5 big drivers: Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, and then Sevier County, which is kind of where the Great Smoky Mountain National Park is. You have Dollywood and all that. And we've got Graceland and Dollywood and Jack Daniels and the Grand Ole Opry, and we've got some pretty big attractions here. So we are product rich, right? So that's all good. So we have this committee, and we meet with them a few times a year, and you know, they kind of drove the strategic plan for the state, and we'll get into that. But basically, I sold it to my boss. I think internally, certainly at the agency, people were really excited that I was considering redoing the website. And every year we do a big co-op program with our big 5 destination partners, and that are those 5 cities that I just mentioned, or 5 destinations. So that's like $100,000 match with each of them. So we put in $500,000, and each of them puts in $100,000, and we do various TV campaigns or digital campaigns or what have you each year that we can tailor for each of them. Well, my boss and I basically went on a tour, so to speak, talking to these people and basically saying, hey, you know, on one hand, we weren't that thrilled how the co-op program had gone the year before, but we asked them, we said, look, we'd like to take half of this money from our budget, $250,000 from the budget, and put it towards a new website for the state, because we feel that this website that we have is not on par with the caliber of work that we are doing for the state tourism brand. And it really helped. It was a validation. I'll never forget, we were sitting in a meeting with our Sevier County partners, and this woman, Sue Carr from Pigeon Forge, as soon as I got done saying, look, we'd like to steer this investment towards a new website, she said, bless you. She said, Brian, I have been praying for you that you would get a new website because your website is awful. And I was like, at that point, my boss was like, okay, this is going to go well. We're going to be able to do this, So we talked to all the partners. We got that buy-in. It's almost like it's not really a board of directors, but it's definitely a strong advisory committee for us. So it's like I had to get my boss. Then we literally drove, went around the state and talked to these people, and everybody was on board. And then we, gave Todd the good news because he was trying to make the old site work, right? So he has been going through platforming this website that it was just massive, and it really, you can't polish a turd. I mean, what are you gonna say?
I think that's a good way to put it. So I want to bring Todd and then in a minute Chris into this. So you mentioned that you already had the relationship with VML, but how did that? Selecting your partners is hard to do. It's where to start. What exactly are you looking for? Capabilities, cultural fit, all that sort of stuff. How was VML selected? How did you go about that as an organization?
So that same Tennessee Tourism Committee, they got together and went through a lot of planning sessions and developed a strategic plan for the state. It was published in 2013. I mean, you can go online and look at it, but really identifying what the main pillars are for the state of Tennessee that drive tourism, and then they coalesced around a brand, which at the time was Made in Tennessee and became Soundtrack of America Made in Tennessee, because our state is so diverse. Memphis on the Mississippi River in West Tennessee is totally different from Nashville, totally different from the Smoky Mountains. So that had always been a challenge. And it was really like every time a new agency came in, they came up with a new brand. It was usually kind of hokey and very country music leaning. And so where does that leave Memphis? Home of the blues and birthplace of rock and roll, or the Smoky Mountains. So it was the first time that level of effort had gone into developing the strategic plan, and there was actually some of those industry leaders on the panel that judged the proposals when the RFP went out. But part of that strategic plan was to find a global agency, like a high caliber global agency, to take Tennessee tourism to the next level. Because along with all this work came a much bigger investment from the state into tourism. I think they had a budget of about $4.5 million to spend on marketing, and that was increased to about $12 million. So it's a much higher level spend. And then VML, again, I wasn't in the room. I came on after, but have become very familiar with how it all went down. They actually put one of the guys who worked on our project, Ben, what's Ben's last name?
Gurmeen.
Ben Gurmeen, in another group, they actually got in a van and drove around the state of Tennessee and took video and took photos. Like, they really wanted the business, and they demonstrated that and basically blew away the competition, and were selected to be the agency of record. So that's basically how VML came on board. Go ahead, Todd, because you were actually there.
Well, partially. So, from a technology side, we were kind of watching a little bit from the sidelines. There were these just amazing creative pieces, and everybody in the agency was buzzing about it, and we're all excited. And then, it was announced that we won, and everybody's like, yeah. And then they're like, oh, and they just replatformed onto a custom CMS, and this is the website you're going to be living with for several years. And we're just like, instantly deflated. And at that time, the existing commissioner and assistant commissioner, like Brian mentioned, there's been a lot of turnover in those positions. We just did this, so we're not really interested in it. So, we did, like you mentioned, go through a interim replatforming stage where we basically took the existing site and mostly set it on Drupal, and that was just to make life a little bit easier because it was a totally custom, no security patches, no support at all CMS. Yeah. I'm not sure why anybody would do that, but we did go through that. So it was nice it was wonderful when Brian came on. Like he said, I mean, it was like a party. It was like, yes, we finally get to do it. We finally get to do it justice. We've seen these amazing commercials and videos, and it's like our site is just Like I
Got
don't
it.
want to show it to people. So it was great.
So we're here at DrupalCon. So you mentioned custom to Drupal, but VML has got deep experience in many technologies. You have to for the business you're in. So what led you to think about Drupal and using Drupal here? And then I know you added some personalization. So how did you make technology decisions? What drove that?
Well, so the decision to use Drupal in some respects was made really before VML was selected as a partner. At VML we have a couple different platforms we tend to gravitate to, just to sort of standardize and keep different tech stacks going. Different clients have requirements. Sometimes we're just forced to deal with those requirements. I will say, I actually started VML as a C# developer, and one of my first projects was a Drupal 6 site, and looked to schooly, and fell in love with it. So, and I've worked on other technologies. I'm not gonna go into those, but
Sure.
I will say, probably don't have to sell Drupal to the people in this room, but very extensible, great for content authors. The speed to market is so much greater compared to other platforms I've worked with.
Well, and I'll add to that, it's the experience. I know that from a design standpoint, we like to collaborate with our clients, with our devs, with the business people. And just right off the bat, we're empowered to be able to do that because the content authoring experience is good. Yeah. Most of the time, that's what your ultimate business client's team's going to see. So it's very comfortable to come in and go, we're going to do this, and we know that you're going to have a good experience. And so that was one of the things where we were super excited. It's like, great, we know that we did this pseudo shift and lift, but now we've got the opportunity to actually do the brand right with the inspiring content and make sure that Brian's team wasn't, they were going to have, I'm not going to call it delightful, but they were going to have a positive authoring experience. Because for this to be successful, it couldn't be a one and done where the content just published once. Yeah. We were going to have to go after it with some tenacity. And I think the proof's in the pudding. What, 50 updates a month?
No, actually, we have an outreach team that works with all of our partners, and in the foundation of this site is our partner pages, and that's attractions and different destinations from across the whole state of Tennessee. There's a high density of that, right? So we needed them to update all of their partner pages through this process. So we sent out a lot of communication. I mean, literally our outreach team traveled across the state having workshops on the new website. We made a video on how to have a good partner page. I mean, we made a couple videos like to get them excited about it and got it out there and actually help these people. So over the course of launching the site in the few months following, we had we killed about 3,000 like partner pages that didn't really have any content on them from the old site, and we had over 500 newly created or updated partner pages just over that launch. And when I talked to the team this morning who has this, they said it's about 100 a month that they either have mostly updated or added new partner pages, which is just a much higher level of engagement than we ever had with our partners before. Because you have to have all of that content. It's got to be good content.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, and this will probably kind of merge a little bit into what we're going to talk about next, but, starting off on the right foot. But, we went through an exercise of kind of defining goals and KPIs and kind of understanding where Tea and Vacation's position should be on the internet. Should it be another Travelocity? Should it be something else, right? And we decided it should not be a Travelocity, thankfully. But that they're very, very high in kind of the consumer funnel, right? From like dreaming, being inspired, that's where they live. And then down here, Travelocity is where I'm booking, and we decided that didn't really make sense to try to shoehorn that into their site. And that's where, when we were talking about partner selection, one of the other benefits of going with Acquia is that we knew about the Acquia Live platform, because of the higher mobile adoption rates and just trying to deliver the more relevant content quicker. The Lift platform then allowed us to really get personalization going very quickly and kind of free up the dev team to work on some other enhancements that we wanted, like content scoring and trending articles and stuff like that, which we may talk about later. So that was
Yeah.
another important part of that selection process.
Got it. And Chris, maybe you could comment on that, because I know you're kind of connecting the back end to the experience on the front end. So were there other things beyond those KPIs that were important, ways you thought about the experience and some of the planning and the workshopping that you were doing with Brian and the team?
Yeah, it sure did. We knew that we had to meet the promise we were making in the marketplace with the campaign work. And how do you deliver on that? And so we believe heavily in workshopping. And so we spent 2 days over just up the hill, actually. And what we wanted to drill into was, okay, let's have the KPIs discussion. Like, let's really get into what's the explicit behavior we're going to expect to see from this particular persona that we're going after, right? We know, we believe they exist. We can observe some behavior. What does that mean for us? And then how do we pay that off? And so once we had the KPI alignment and really kind of some hypotheses about this is the behavior that we expect to see, we shifted very quickly into really blowing out a bunch of user stories and really doing your classic kind of scrum as I want so that. And we drilled into that not only from the different audience types, if I recall correctly, I think we went through all the audience types. We would put them out in almost a day in a life fashion, right? So what is something that they're going to do once a year? What is something that they're going to do as they get closer to their trip? How could we impact that? Should we impact that? And so we filled a room with hundreds of 4x6 Post-it notes, and then we kind of shifted the lens to, okay, we've talked about this audience. What about our client, Brian, right, and the commissioner? Like, what do you need from this? And we did user stories for them. And that's actually how we kind of kicked off the partner content scoring discussion was, well, as a, it'd be great so that, you know, we essentially it's user-generated content. And they will get feedback. And they will get feedback from smaller single-owner operators that, okay, how do I rank higher? I'm not ranking high enough. And, you know, he mentioned some of the other entertainment properties in the state, how I can't compete with that. Well, actually, you can, but you have to do it with good content that's updated frequently. So we were able to leverage Drupal to actually build a content scoring system to almost upvote those that do well. Mm-hmm. And so that was something that we never would have discovered if we hadn't sat in a room all day and we had a conversation. If I remember right, it was like a lunchtime conversation. We're like, great, let's blow that out. And so then we added that to our set of stories and really started doing the story mapping based on that.
Brian?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, I think some of the challenges with the old site was it was designed for our partners. You know, like they want to be able to go and find themselves and have everything on there. Mm-hmm. And as a result, we had like, what, 260 categories?
Yeah.
That were on the site. Like, you're not going to go through 260 categories. So the first thing these guys did was presented the actual, like, site visits and page views and where people were spending time. And it was on like 1/10 of the site, right? So so the partners can go find themselves great, but the users, the people we're actually trying to inspire to want to come visit Tennessee, they're not looking at all that. So, you know, we started with the data, and then they led us through a conversation, was like, okay, we want to take that from 260 content categories down to like 40. You know, to make it manageable. And then we started talking about, you know, those content stories, like different types of content stories, right? So we have like articles, partner pages, just all the different content types. And, you know, that's where we did the color-coded sticky notes on the wall to think about through this and what category would that go into and how are we going to serve that to the user. So how they can discover it on their own, or how are we going to use the Acquia to, like, all right, you're from St. Louis, so geographically you're probably going to come into West Tennessee, so we already know that about you, but then once you actually start clicking around, we're going to build a profile on you and then serve you up content that we think you might be interested in. So if, like, you're into fishing and coming from the West, we might show you a lake or a river, you know, that kind of thing. And then I start getting out of, that's like the limit of my technical understanding. But that was the process, and it was. I mean, it was a couple days in a room with the sticky notes, and obviously it was, you know, it was really productive and beneficial.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, I think the other key thing to that is, if I recall correctly, like at the end of, was it the end of day one or the end of day two, where the commissioner came in? Oh, yeah. And we literally pitched, here's the direction that we're going. And so it wasn't where we, did a laser light show, PowerPoint, or went to go ahead and build stuff. At this point, all we had was sticky notes on a wall, and then we got up there and we literally walked through, here's problems that we're going to solve. Are we solving the right problems from your perspective? Are we avoiding or are we negating some other things? Does this work for you? What's your feedback? And it was overwhelmingly positive. And it was, I think it was the day 2.
Yeah, it was. Well, I also say one thing is that we, basically designated Brian as the key product owner, and that was very helpful because we did have a little bickering on a few things. We have regional managers, and
We had a passionate discussion.
there's some bickering, but we did at the end of the day have an ultimate authority. Brian made the final decision, so I think that was important in the process, or else you just get mired down in arguments.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely
somebody
agree.
has to make that final
And
decision.
they made that clear. They're like, we need one person who's going to own this and make decisions. I mean, I did bring a couple other people into the room, but because we want to get this thing done too.
But,
so.
but really interesting. So you had data to begin with. You looked at the facts as opposed to people's opinions. You started to think about internal customers versus external customers. How the organization likes to think of itself versus how the customer, the consumer, wants to find information. And then you also had your ultimate executive sponsor early on, whether they were coming to check it out or you invited them in. Kind of just very interesting to, from an approach point of view, what you did very early on to try and set yourselves up correctly. Visibility of the executive, the commissioner, and those data points. So let's move along a little bit of time. So when we were preparing this, we talked about crawl, walk, and run. And so how did we get started? What were some of the things that we were doing to kind of begin on this process without trying to boil the ocean? Chris, why don't you sort of start us off here?
Well, yeah, we really decided that we're going to focus on, okay, we know that we have to address the experiences question. We know that we have to address the geographic question. And then that's really what we started to prioritize is how do we're getting the people coming in, we need to inspire them, and then how do we not boil the ocean, as you put it, because it's so easy to approach personalization with, we could do this and we could do this, and all of a sudden you've got 60 different variables, and you don't know how you're going to produce them. You're not sure how on the client side who has a staff to produce those things. Like, are you handing over something that they can even pay off? Mm-hmm. And so we went into it very diligently with, let's do what we know from what the data told us, let's pay those select things off. Let's do them very, very well. And so when we do get asked, like, what was one of the secret sauces that went to the success of this digital experience, it was really, let's do a few things supremely well, and then the content scoring, I think, was the other half of that, of, okay, we know that we culled out, we pruned off the tree, probably too severely, but that's a learning that we learned over the course of a year, to drive folks for, let's get better quality content, and then let's elevate those. And then on the back end, those partners, they get emails, right? Reminders about doing your updates. We did a whole bunch of communication ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And I had totally forgotten about the video, honestly. Setting those people up and empowering them to go, here's why this is important to you. Your success as a partner is now responsible on you. And we'll give you this mechanism for you having success through tapping into our connected digital experience, right? We've got amazing creative. We're now moving them into our owned property, if you will. Your visibility, your success is up to you.
And how do the partners react to that? I mean, there's a lot of them, and they feel that they should be in charge of their departments. So how did they react to what you were trying to do and drive that internal change?
Most of the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. I mean, the site looks great, the imagery, all of the design, wow, they were blown away. And just to touch on that video, that was one of our, we have 3 grand divisions in Tennessee. Each of them, we have a division manager. They're our outreach team dealing with all of these partners. And one of them had the idea, give me a video so that the 3 of us aren't telling a different story, and our knowledge of how all of this works is somewhat limited. So give us the tools to go out there and communicate that. So we did, and that was very, very helpful. But we did anticipate and get into some partner conversations that were, there was a little friction. We knew going into it, like the Tri-Cities in East Tennessee, you've got Bristol, Johnson City, and Kingsport. Well, when you look at our site and it's divided by regions, East Tennessee has a whole lot more, cities and towns and attractions than even Middle, and far more than West. But the way that the site's laid out, like we can't feature, we already separated East Tennessee and then like Smokies, so they already had, 7 instead of 4 or whatever as far as the top line. But how do you deal with that? And we decided to go with featuring Bristol, because Bristol's a little bit bigger city, they have a higher economic impact, and they have a stronger brand because of the Speedway and birthplace of country music museum up there. And so we did that knowing that it was going to cause consternation for those other partners in the Tri-Cities, and we were prepared for it. But we also talked through what was that criteria that set it apart so that we were prepared for that partner communication. Sure enough, a couple months into launching the website, get a call from Brenda Whitson, the head of the CVB up in Johnson City, and Brian, we have some major concerns with your website. So she and Judd, the guy from the Kingsport CVB, we get on a call, and they're like, we're looking around on here, and we look at our pages, and we see, Bristol's called out. Why aren't we called out? So we have that conversation. Then we're like, well, we see the Smoky Mountains in Knoxville, and we think they're, advertising is a part of this too. People can pay to like boost their page on some of these experience pages on our site. And they're like, well, they're buying up all this space and everything. So we talked through that. They got the Bristol thing. We got through that. And then Dave Jones, our East Tennessee division manager, went up and scheduled a meeting with them to really just talk through and take a look at their site. And what they found was the attractions and restaurants and partners in Kingsport and Johnson City didn't have partner pages. They didn't have the content that was needed on the site to take up that real estate, so it was being filled by other destinations. So he literally sat there with them and helped build partner pages, had meeting, and then they like rescheduled a meeting with all of the partners and helped them build those partner pages so they could fill that void. But it was that level of effort, really had to go against the buy-in for this website, which was just radically different from what they had experienced before, where they can just drop down. Hey, there I am, great.
Well, and sorry, to tie this back to the whole crawl, walk, run thing is, to try not to, especially when you're personalizing, bite off more than you can chew at the beginning. So really personalization, especially if you're using something like Lyft to help you along, it's not as much a technical issue as it really is a content issue. And so when you start talking to a client or whoever about personalizing a site, there's going to be a lot of big ideas. They're going to want everything to be personalized on every possible aspect of a visiting user's profile, but that's not really realistic. And if you get bogged down worrying about personalizing everything for everybody, then you really haven't personalized anything at the end of the day, probably. And you've made the effort so large, you'll probably never launch. So pick a couple things, start small, test, revise, make sure it's an ongoing project, not just ongoing effort, not just a one-time project, and keep at it. Get a schedule going.
Yeah.
Right. And get good. Get good at crawl, then move into walk.
Right.
Because while everybody says, "Oh, we're going to do crawl, walk, run," so like in 3 months we'll be at run, right? No, have the conversation with your clients and actually understand how does that content move around. How do you support a personalization system?
Yeah.
And then you have to design it so that the framework gets the content out there, but also gets them out in a way that they're successful, rather than like what you don't want to do is get into a situation where every month they're not doing well.
Yeah, I would just say we're a year in, and we're still making adjustments. Get back into the content. We maybe cut too much. Well, SEO plays into a lot of this too, right? Like you got to have a lot of good, rich content and copy and things on the site. Well, we had cut our events calendar from the site. We kind of moved to almost having partner pages for events, like Bonnaroo is an annual event, and all these different festivals and things were annual events, so they were kind of evergreen. But this massive event calendar that was on the site kind of went away. Well, the SEO team kind of came back and said, well, we cut that and our site traffic dropped. Turns out, that was one of our biggest drivers because there's no other entity out there who's doing a statewide event calendar. You own that real estate. You got to bring that back. So we did. But that was a lesson, and we did hear from some of the partners on that who were posting events to our event calendar. But we brought it back, and we also improved upon it by doing some custom API with like Ticketmaster and things like that. So these bigger events are auto-populating on our calendar, and it's actually a much more useful calendar than just, with all respect to the zoo, but they were putting, they would populate it with like the Easter egg hunt and the craft fair, and like that was all, you were seeing, and you weren't seeing like Bruno Mars at the Bridgestone Arena, which might cause somebody to want to drive to Nashville and get a hotel room and stay. So that, and then I think that in terms of the lift, we started with about 25%, and we're just kind of like seeing how much personalization should we add on the site, and we're, now that we're kind of seeing what's happening, we may dial that up a little bit more. But you also have to have the content, because otherwise they'll just serve the same thing.
Got it. So Todd, how was all of this implemented? It's just not, a lot of this start carefully, get the alignment, but how did you actually go about wiring the pieces together and making it work?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, so we started with, we actually had a Drupal 7 site, so we decided to make the jump to Drupal 8. We felt like the time was right. It had matured enough. Modules were maturing that, and this was over a year ago that we started on this project. So we started with Drupal 8. Worked on migrating our Drupal 7 content over to 8. Like I mentioned, stayed invested in Lift. So we added Lift and Content Hub, got that going on the site. And then we came up with, we talked about scoring and things like that. We came up with some custom modules to basically go through and based, again, laddering back to KPIs. So one of our new KPIs was going to be partner outbound links. So again, being inspirational, assuming that the traveler is going to move on to somewhere else, we're fine if they go out to Dollywood's site. To us, that we've succeeded, like they're showing an intent to do something, right? So we specifically score those fields on the content that we feel would be like a website address, newsletter sign up, inspirational banner images. So we set up the system to basically, every time the content is saved, give it a score. Excuse me. And then we filter, we added a system also to add a trending aspect to that too, where we also allow consumer views over time plus the score to kind of feed the site and actually lift the content up. So that was a big part of it. And then we also, so as far as like personalization goes, we really landed on three main areas. Where the user is going, where the traveler is going, what the traveler is interested in. And then we used Lift actually to move users through our CRM and channel funnel, which I thought at the end of the day was kind of a cool idea. So destination being, I think you mentioned this earlier, if somebody's browsing from St. Louis, we can tell that with Lyft, and we show them content from Memphis until they tell us otherwise. So we do allow an explicit choice by the user to eventually override what we're guessing about them. Same with experiences. If they're looking at a lot of outdoor content, then we start featuring outdoor articles, and the site adjusts in that way. And the way the CRM funnel works, and there's probably other ways we could have done this, but Lyft made it super easy, is we just created different content pods for email sign up, printed guide requests for the Pandora channel, for the Snapchat channel, and set up events in Lyft. And basically, as the user, if they've already given us their email address, we don't need to keep asking for their email address. So now we're like, do you want to go see Snapchat? Do you want to sign up on Snapchat or whatever, or Pandora or whatever? So we keep guiding them in different places in the site to those different channels.
Very nice. So let's look at some of the results, Brian. Let's start with you. We think about how you measure success, that'll come in a moment. But are there key results and metrics that you look at, whether KPI driven, as we've said, or feedback from partners? What have you seen as a result so far?
Well, I mean, feedback from partners is important. Looking at, site visits, time on site, which has increased. I mean, that's been a big increase, the level of engagement and time on our site. And then those partner outbounds, like Todd just mentioned, we're holding ourselves accountable to try to steer, push people out. Because, we want to inspire them, and then we want them to go buy a ticket to an attraction, or at least go peruse the website of an attraction and get into that planning phase of the trip. So some of it's related to campaign. I mean, since then, we've invested in some other research tools, like Adara, where we've put pixels on every page on the site, so we can see when that actually converts all the way through to booking an airplane ticket or booking a hotel, and follow that through, and that gives us insights on timing. So, when is the right time to feature fall content? It depends on the demographic to some extent, but the average booking window for fall content, if we learn that's, 65 days out from when they book, that's when we need to start featuring some of those articles and some of that content. So it's like these guys said, it's an ongoing learning process that drives the content decisions that we're making. I mean, a lot of the last year, honestly, has been putting those building blocks in place with our partners, and just making sure that we're well represented in each of those experience categories, from outdoor to culinary to music to history, and cover all those kind of bases. And then we start with the articles, are our opportunity to really feature things based on the collection of the data from site behavior, but then also how it funnels through using some of those other research products.
Now, you mentioned when the events calendar was taken out, traffic dropped dramatically, but you had shared also there were things sort of outside of your control that also affect your success. I think worth sharing with everybody some of those things. And what did you do about that?
Well, it's a constant battle. So, what Joe's referring to, one of our planning conversations, is right around the time we launched and made this big investment of not only financial but time going into this thing. Google also started to make some changes in that they're curating tourism pages and travel pages, and they're using algorithms to anticipate what the most popular destinations for travel will be. And that's our site traffic dropped. You expect it to drop a little bit and then come back. It went through the floor, and we just launched this new website. So part of that was really getting more engagement from the SEO team to okay, what happened? And we talked about the event calendar. We're also now the team in charge of kind of managing our content creators and travel writers who we send out into the field to get video and photo and write articles for the site. Our itineraries are actually reviewed by the SEO team, and we have held workshops with our content creators and set up guidelines so that they're actually writing for optimal SEO performance on the site. And then that's coming in. We review the articles, both internally using those guidelines and when needed from the VML SEO team, and then uploading it to the site and tagging it appropriately, really getting to those building blocks. And that has helped us gain a lot of ground back towards getting our site traffic back up. But the Google thing's frustrating because as an industry, tourism has spent, I'm sure, billions of dollars on the platform, and we're just the search engine. Well, apparently you're the search destination now too, but that's kind of our job, right? We want to help people discover places that they might not know about, that's not going to get fed by a popularity algorithm. That's what we want to do. We want to bring them in, and then as they demonstrate interest, help them discover places within our state they never have. And, that's just how it goes.
And so what about with the VML team? When you think about measuring success for you, there's many different constituents here at play for you as your client and their end customers. Todd and Chris, how did you measure success in this?
Well, excuse me. So I mean, we did have several site metrics where we did see, very, very big improvements, and in the areas that we were hoping to see big improvements. So,
Yeah.
Organic search again, we've been suffering because of Google and SEO issues, but the visitors actually coming to our site, I think it was like the month after, it was like we got a 30% or something session duration increase, like 10% more time on page. I forget all the numbers, but again, those partner outbounds year over year, I think have gone up 5 or 6% now, which is important to us. So, really, I think that's the validation that we were looking for. Again, not pretending that there weren't issues that we needed to solve, and we just pivoted very quickly as we could to try to solve those. And with the site traffic down too, just a side note, there are some other things we did post-launch, because there are other channels again that people are consuming content on. It's not, web is still big, but there's all these other things. So again, speaking to how easy it is to extend Drupal, very shortly after launch, we implemented Facebook Instant Articles, and so that helped with getting our voice out on those channels. And then also after that, it was a little more difficult, but Google AMP articles. And there's also it's difficult also to kind of marry those analytics together. Like, do you call that a page view if it's on Google service? So that's something we've also been monitoring. But did you have something?
Well, I think the other thing to that is that by looking at the metrics, we also ask ourselves, okay, from a human standpoint, did we move the ball forward? Mm-hmm. And we knew that we did. We were seeing what we hoped to see, which was people browsing, people going, oh, okay, the St. Louis example, to see somebody jump from Memphis to Knoxville content that was more food-based, paid off our hypothesis. So that was very satisfying to be able to look at it and go, we solved a real human problem, and it also had the benefit of being able to move the business needles in the right direction, obviously the challenges notwithstanding, but that was really exciting to see those numbers come in, and to see that real human impact that at the end of the day is going to result in somebody coming to a Nashville or somebody coming to a Bristol or a Memphis, having a great time, telling their friends, and then bringing more people with them the next time. And that's what I really liked, is this was an exciting brand to be able to work with and to work on, because you can walk around and see the tangible results.
Well, and I just want to add that it brought the website in line with the brand.
Right.
When we're making these big investments in advertising, we're bringing them to a place that reflects what that initial experience was when they were viewing our video or seeing a digital ad. It continues that on, instead of like, oh, this doesn't really line up with what I just saw,
Right.
So for me, that's a big win.
Awesome. So, crawl, walk, run, and setting expectations. As you look at the future and you think about where do you go from here, what do you tackle next? Brian, what's next in store for Tourism Tennessee?
Well, as far as the site goes, we have since launched a new industry page that is also on Drupal and utilizes this brand. We're almost done with a new press site, and it's a continuation of this site, adding the content. I think we're going to take a deeper dive into the personalization and see how we can utilize that even more based on what we've learned over the past year. And then, our campaigns, we just continue to try to be creative and stand apart, so we drive people here. If you haven't, or you have the opportunity, check out our colorblind list viewer video that you can find through our website. That's a neat project that we started last fall, and we'll continue on and doing exciting, exclusive concert activations to create inbound marketing as opposed to, trying to just keep pumping dollars into the search engines.
I think that video is what we have on slide 1. If I have time, I'll go back to it and play it. I think that's what's there. Anything, Chris, Todd, you'd add in terms of the future as you think about what's next and helping Brian in that mission?
Well, for me, it's the excitement of being able to take the personalization to the next level, right? We have the competency now. We know that we're doing it well. Okay, how do we take it to the next level? How do we go deeper into the creative for the campaigns and more tightly integrate those? so that emotional impact. If you haven't seen that video, you'll tear up. It's a beautiful video. For me, the next challenge from kind of tying the brand tighter together is how do we start to pay some of that off via some of those things? How do we go into some of the ideas around showing B-roll from some of those interviews that we did with some folks, and kind of trying to pull a little bit of that forward, but certainly the personalization and really going to the next level and going into it knowing that we're going to be successful when we tackle that next step.
You touched on video. We need more video.
Hey, video is content, man. The kids love it. That's what they tell me.
Yeah, I mean, just continuing to put great content onto the site. I think we've always had a little bit of a challenge kind of marrying up our campaigns with our site. I think there's room for improvement there because, I mean, again, the creative team at VML just produces this amazing work, and it's always represented to some degree, but sometimes I think we could improve in that area. Personalization, I mean, of course, I would love to expand on that. What I'd really like to do is probably set up a schedule of A/B testing and see how that goes and start seeing like if we can improve the site in that way. I mean, those are probably the key areas for me. I mean, we're really improving the partner communication stuff has really improved. There may be still some tweaks that could be done with that, but I mean, that whole program with getting them to improve their content, I think has worked out really well. So
Great. Very good. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of what we wanted to share. We'll see if we have any questions from the audience. We have a mic, I think, should be on if anyone wants to come and ask us a tough one. Any takers? I'm going to try. If I haven't got any questions, I'm going to see if I can go back. Gerard's got one.
In terms of the actual process, the development process, and did you imply agile technology? Did you have sprints, and what was your cadence? And then after you went live, have you continued that concept of continuous improvement?
yeah, well, I mean, I will say it was a little agile waterfall. So for the initial launch, we do work in 2-week sprints. So we go through kind of the normal ceremonies we have. We work out of Jira. We estimate everything, point everything, have a daily scrum, and then we work in 2-week release cycles. So now, having said that, the initial site redesign didn't launch for months, right? So it took that long until Brian and the product owner was happy with what had been released, and this is something we can actually put out in the world. But now we're still working, and the dev team is sitting behind you actually. We still work in 2-week sprints, and so now we do have much more regular releases now. I think every sprint at this point of features and stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's just continued. It was, and that's something that we've struggled with at VML in the past is, somebody comes to us and they want a big website project, and they do it, and then they disappear. And this has been just an amazing opportunity to, release a product and continue to iterate over it. And improve it, so hopefully we don't have to do another big release someday in the future, and we could just keep on top of it.
Well, and it shows the power of going from a project type relationship to a true relationship, that we were able to pivot, right? When we ran into some of those challenges with the calendar, we pivoted. And Brian didn't have to go down and track down another design and dev group to fix that. He had his team, hey guys, we need to pivot on this. And great, and then that really, I think, got us into the cycle of the incremental point releases, and got us out of kind of that mode of like the big reveal, which I hate the big reveals. Sometimes you need to do that, even within, what's that MVP can be sizable, but it's making sure that you shift gears within the context of having a good product owner like Brian and having the ongoing relationship to be able to make those pivots. And I think that's what continues to keep the relationship strong.
Yeah, and I think you have to have that relationship to be able to do that, because I've also worked on projects where we're just like the IT shop, and that's okay, but it will never run as you can't move as agilely as we have with this project and pivot when we need to. So
They didn't tell me it was never going to end.
I said today it will never end.
It's a journey, Brian. It's a journey.
Gigi has a question.
Yeah, I do. So it seems like a major strength of this project was pairing the right technology with the right approach and really kind of setting a precedent early on for putting the time and energy and workshopping in to make sure that you had data and content that would really put the technology to work in the way that it was supposed to. If you were working with a new client who was maybe a little more hesitant to put the legwork in at the initial stages of the project, what would your kind of recommendation be to get them on board to really do it right from the start?
I think it's going and sitting with them, and it's sitting down and being able to run, even if it's a mini workshop, to be able to come in and go, okay, let's really truly understand what do you feel your problem is. Here's the data that we'll a lot of times come in and we'll grab data, even if it's a client that we can't get into their analytics yet, we'll make some educated guesses. So we'll go in with a baseline, and then we'll really have the conversation with them of, okay, who is your true consumptive audience, not your aspirational audience, but the consumptive audience that's coming to your digital experience. And then from there we go, okay, well, we know those people tend to want to do these kind of things. How well do we execute that? So we always start with the audience, and we really try to bring in the human truth of that audience, and then almost use that as a mirror to hold up to the business and to the brand and go, okay, great, where do we want to pivot towards? So a lot of times it's about problem definition. And until you get to that, yeah, you can go and you can build things and you can launch things, but you don't really know if you had the human impact. And importantly, within that workshop is to, what are the real explicit KPIs? What are the behaviors that we can watch, we can measure, we can adjust, right? What are the, I heard a saying once, you know, you only get 3 key performance indicators, because if you have more than 3, that starts to become all the performance indicators, and then they're not key. So we really hone in on those 2 things to get the buy-in. And then from there, it's really helping educate and get the client sold on the process of getting incremental point releases into the marketplace. And sometimes that is a discussion around waterfall of, you know, you start out with a great budget and then you get to the end and you need to pivot and you have no budget, as opposed to a more Scrum fashion of, let's get some of that return going very quickly. That way, if we do need to pivot, you've got the budget. So it's kind of evangelist, it's educator, it's facilitator, and starting there.
Any other questions? Let's see if we can get this video. I don't know if this is it. Hang on. Right, let's try that. It came.
Everybody at work was saying how pretty the colors are. You don't know that you're missing it because you never saw it to begin with.
I remember being in like kindergarten and like having to read the labels on the crayons.
I took a test. There were 50 pages. Normally, if you're colorblind, you miss 7 or more. I missed 48.
I see the colors and they're beautiful and they're fluorescent and they're great. And I'll say, honey, see that? And he'll say, what? I wish he could see what I see.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
That's. I'm glad to have seen it. I just wish I'd seen this all my life. Kind of like what I would imagine. The difference between here and heaven. I mean, I really feel like now I know why people come from miles and states around just to see this.
Let's give these guys a round of applause. Nice job. Great. Thanks, everybody.
I noticed it about halfway through.
All right, thanks. Good job. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was awesome. Thank you so much. It was great. And luckily, that video at the end.
Yeah, it was super.